In the beginning, there was chaos, and out of chaos there was the world, its passions, and from her, order. So goes Greek creation. A century before Hesiod transcribed the creation myths, Greek society was amid a chaos of its own. This was a time historians like to call the Greek Dark Ages, and a dark age it was. Northern nomadic invaders sacked the ancient cities, literacy rates plummeted, and Mycenaean culture was generally on the decline. But out of this chaos came order. This order was a political system that would forever change Western understanding between society, God, and man. The Polis. Before the Polis, Greece was centered around a series of strongholds, in a way resembling early medieval forts. The strongholds and the way of life that came about with them can be categorized as the Mycenaean culture, the culture of Bronze Age Greece, and the mythical Trojan War. Terracotta pottery became an earmark of the Mycenaean civilization. The pottery depicted stylized representations of marine and plant life, which showed a fondness for minimalistic linear designs, a motif that would influence Greek art into the classical era. Although there was an abundance of art, archaeological evidence suggested that mainland Greece was ruled by warrior kings. But despite Mycenaean predilection towards warfare, the kings and their strongholds were unable to stop the oncoming threat to their society, the Dorians and their iron weaponry, which allowed the Dorians to take over the most fertile and richest parts of the Greek peninsula. This was the aforementioned chaos that destabilized Greek society. As in Hesiod's Theogonies, the temperament of passions gave way to order. Centuries passed, and the migration waves halted. The saturation of fertile lands forced the Dorians to take up fallowing their newly acquired farms, instead of cropping them to exhaustion and then migrating. Doric peoples settled and took refuge in the old Mycenaean centers of power, while many Mycenaeans fled their homes and set up new cities that are today broadly known as the Ionian Cities. These cities were founded in western Greece and Asia Minor, adjacent to more structurally advanced civilizations of Anatolia, Egypt, and the Levant. Living in a hostile and alien environment also gave Ionian peoples impetus to create complex governments in order to create political and social cohesion. Refugees drawn from diverse localities and traditions were forced to find relevant multicultural symbols and start society anew. The existential plasticity of the Dark Age Ionian condition gave way to the structure that is the polis. Many historians also like to point to the formation of the polis city-state structure as being a direct result of the mountainous terrain of the Greek peninsula. While geography undoubtedly played its part in the formation of the polis, ignoring social, political, and economic factors of its formation would be a complete essentialization of the cultural process. So what is the polis exactly, and how did it function? Well, the literal definition of polis is city in Greek. It's where we get the English words metropolis and necropolis from. Before the city, jurisdiction was predominantly in the hands of tribal communities. This system of jurisprudence was functional, but very limiting. For one, personal security could not be maintained. Disputes often resulted in personal or familial revenge, and settling intertribal conflicts would be as complex and difficult as solving modern international ones. As time passed, populations grew and tribal identity deteriorated. Thus, there was a need to come together and codify judicial practice with a supra-tribal system. So the centralization process began, and law was dragged into one location, one center, one area for civilians, the city. There was also an external pull guiding post-Mycenaean nations together. Disunited tribes found it difficult to defend themselves from aggressing monolithic city-states. The early polis military system, like its social structure, was based on aristocratic landowners, who were the only ones with access to horses. Since grassland was so scarce across the mountainous Greek terrain, horses had to be fed with grain. This led to the largest landowners consolidating military and civic power. A circular relationship took place as landowning produced wealth, wealth produced power, and power validated the desire to conquer and obtain more wealth. The political realities in the peninsula were such that smaller landowning nobles wished to limit the strength of the larger landed elite, and more democratic systems were formed. As much as the Grecian hills led to the consolidation of power, it also became its liberator. Because mountains limited mobility, an ancient cavalryman's main advantage on the battlefield, nobles sought a way to eliminate the advantage of cavalry altogether. The aristocrats utilized the strength of heavy infantry by instituting discipline in warriors so they could coordinate into a single, cohesive unit. This unit, and the military tactics that were developed from it, were known as the phalanx system, and it became the backbone of the polis. The hoplites, the individual phalanx warriors, not only had a public duty to wage war, but a public duty to act as a citizen as well. Although the centralization process in Greece followed a similar path as in the Middle East, the geography again found a way to change the course of Greek history and differentiate it from its parent civilization. In the Middle East, farmers and peasants saw city dwellers as oppressors. In Greece, however, the social and power dynamic was different. In Greece, cash crops such as grapes and olives were grown in the countryside, which made many smaller farmers, instead of administrative city dwellers, very rich. The increase in the potential value of land that resulted from the cash crops led to social mobility and a slightly more meritocratic system, and thus a higher participation of the populace towards political life. Now it's here that I want to stress that although the development of the polisi followed a similar path, each city took its individual route to political life, while setting up various forms of government. Institutions that resulted from the structural social mobility varied from city-state to city-state, such as the rowers in Athens and the Spartan heiresses. Different forms of governments, from oligarchies, democracies, and monarchies, also sprung up. If I become more competent at this stuff, I will do a video on each of these, and more, at a later date. For now, I believe I did a good job explaining how the polis happened and why it came about. The polis itself, and the ideas that sprang from it, are so complex that philosophers, historians, and political scientists have spent millennia trying to understand its implications. So I, as a small channel, am not going to come close to explaining everything, especially not in my first video, especially since there are so many other historical concepts that I want to cover that I believe haven't been mentioned on YouTube. I'm going to give this a try, and I hope you guys, whoever you are, will follow me along the way. This has been the 10,000. Peace, and thanks for watching.